A violation of privacy or a necessary step to protect populations against what's referred to as terrorism. The war of words between Apple and the FBI is triggering a wider debate over the right balance between security and privacy. So who is the real defender of the people in this story, Apple or the FBI? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. It's a public battle that goes to the heart of a very big debate. How much power should law enforcement and intelligence officials have to monitor our digital communications? On one side, the US Justice Department and the FBI. On the other, tech giant Apple, which is refusing to make software to unlock one of its iPhones. The phone in question was used by one of the San Bernardino attackers, and the FBI says it needs to be unlocked so it can carry out a full investigation. But for Apple, it's about much more than a single phone. It's about the security of hundreds of millions of people's private communications and a precedent that could threaten civil liberties. We'll explore the ins and outs of this debate with our guests in a moment. But first, Al Jazeera's Shihad Britanzi sets things up.
Apple, what do you say? Keep the FBI away!
Protests were organized against the government's order across the US. In D.C., they gathered outside the FBI headquarters.
The FBI is specifically asking tech workers to deliberately undermine the security systems that they themselves are working to build.
Yet one poll suggests a majority of Americans don't see what the issue is, and one of software's pioneers suggested the government had a case.
This is a specific case where the government's asking for access to information. They're not asking for some general thing, they're asking for a particular case.
But Facebook, Google, and even Microsoft's CEO and chief legal officer have expressed misgivings. The FBI isn't asking Apple to hand over the password of one phone because Apple doesn't have the password. Those are all stored on the phones themselves. So instead, the government wants Apple to create a new program to bypass the security system so that they can have millions of attempts at cracking the code. At the moment, if 10 erroneous attempts are made, all data is wiped. Apple and civil liberties groups argue that this isn't about one phone used in last year's mass shooting in California.
What the government is seeking is a legal precedent that can be used multiple times in all kinds of circumstances, and not just involving cell phones, but everything that's connected to the internet, from cars to appliances, medical devices.
The White House assured technology companies it would not seek a potentially contentious fight over legislation forcing the installation of so-called backdoors in encryption technology. But it's been reported that the Obama administration instead ordered government agencies to find workarounds. The use of an obscure law from the 18th century, the All Writs Law, to compel Apple to help the FBI break into its customers' devices as part of the investigation into a national tragedy would appear to be an attempt to do that. Even those who support the strategy accept that a complex international precedent is being set. Would you be concerned if Russia or China used ancient law to try and get a backdoor into encrypted technology in their own countries?
Absolutely, I would be. I am concerned about my own privacy. I'm concerned about the protection of my own sensitive, personal, family information. We have the brain power across this land to bring them together so that in a way that allows law enforcement to do its work and still allows us to be protected.
The case goes to court in March. Shihad Britanzi, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, now let's get the thoughts of our guests. Joining us in New York, Dean Crutchfield, brand advisor and strategist for the Dean Crutchfield Company. In New Hampshire, Gary Miliefsky, co-founder and CEO of SnoopWall, a mobile device security company. He's a cybersecurity specialist who previously worked on setting up the US Department of Homeland Security. And joining us on Skype from Malmo Media Evolution City is Aral Balkan. Aral is a coder, founder, and chief lead designer of Indie. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with Dean Crutchfield in New York. The basic question: Is Apple justified in resisting the court's instruction?
I think that you have a massive watershed moment here with a lot of responsibility between technology and privacy. And brands aren't just about power, they're about responsibility. And Tim Cook and Apple are taking a stand here that they need to take. But ultimately, where does that lead them as we go into March? So yes, it's a good thing that Apple's doing.
Well, Gary Miliefsky, your view?
Well, you know, if the FBI and the NSA and other agencies start to think about the tarnishing or the damaging of the Made in America brand, we've seen backdoors in Cisco equipment, backdoors in Juniper equipment, and the revenues, billions of dollars, have been lost internationally. And now China and some of their companies like HTC and Huawei are going to pick up those revenues because nobody wants to buy an insecure solution or device.
Well, Aral Balkan, what's your view of the issue, this delicate balance of privacy and security?
Well, I don't know if it's a delicate balance to speak of between privacy and security. I think they're interrelated subjects. The key issue here is one of civil liberties. Now, Apple is defending this primarily because it makes perfect sense for their business model. Now, of course, their business model is the result of certain decisions, some of them ethical, that they've taken in the past. But realize that Apple's a very different company to, say, Google. Apple sells products at a price that makes them very happy, right? They sell an iPhone, they're happy. They've done what they set out to do. Google, on the other hand, needs your data. Facebook needs your data. So they're very different types of companies. For Apple, privacy is an absolute competitive advantage. It's what they can compete on without breaking a sweat, which would cause companies like Google and Facebook, if they went private, right? If they actually said, we're going to respect your privacy, they would go bankrupt. So that's an absolute competitive advantage. So regardless of what we might think that Tim Cook thinks or anyone at Apple thinks, there is a core business case for why they're defending this. And this, of course, has ramifications for our civil liberties. And that's the important case here, that by protecting their business model, they are also protecting, in this case, our civil liberties. And I think that's very important.
Well, Dean Crutchfield, you wanted to add something there?
Well, this is about victims and justice. So let's keep a measure here that it's important they take that stand. But ultimately, I'm sure they've calculated that they will eventually unlock these phones. The problem is that once that happens, and that's what we're scared about, suddenly they want thousands of phones opened up. So we have to keep in mind that there is a precedent here, that a lot of telecommunication companies over the years have always helped the US government when it comes to security. So this isn't something that's totally unique. But I think the implications that it's not just about a phone, it could be about every electronic gadget that we use, is something that creates necessarily some concern. But ultimately, I think there has to be some measured access, that this will eventually mean they have to unlock the phone. They just have to be seen to publicly protecting the public for the sake of their brand.
Well, Gary Miliefsky, we heard there that Bill Gates is the lone Silicon Valley figure not backing Apple in this particular matter. He's arguing what the lawyers are arguing, the lawyers for the government are arguing, that this is a specific request in a specific case. It is in no issue setting any form of wider precedent. This argument has been used before with not exactly the kind of expected results. Do you think that argument, though, is valid or not?
Well, Apple has already complied with 70 requests to unlock iCloud accounts and phones in the past, before this iPhone 5C and before version 8 of their operating system. The new version is so secure, it's very difficult for Apple to comply with the request. Literally, they'd have to take the phone apart, solder connections, and do some amazing things that might be nearly impossible and cost millions of dollars, because just booting the phone goes straight to the PIN pad. If you don't have the PIN, 10 tries and you're out. And there's a crypto chip on the phone. So it's a very complex issue, even just to get into this one phone. And now to solve the problem in the future, they'd have to weaken their operating system for all future deployments and then send out a patch to all phones. But you can't patch a locked phone until the phone's unlocked.
Well, Aral Balkan, essentially the FBI was asking Apple to design an update to unencrypt this phone. Now, this is something that is of great concern to anybody using an Apple phone, is it not? Everybody updates their phones what seems like once every 2 days.
Well, of course, and we trust those updates because we believe that they are secure. Once there is a backdoor like this, and again, even in your introductory segment, I think this was raised very well, there is no such thing as a backdoor. There are only doors. Once we have a backdoor, other people and other organizations and other countries will want to use that door and will very quickly be able to use that door. They will expand a lot of energy to do that. And just previously, you mentioned Microsoft and Bill Gates. Well, there's a reason Microsoft is coming out in support of the FBI. I think it was a couple of days ago, February 17th, that Terry Myerson from Microsoft tweeted a thank you to the Department of State for choosing Windows 10. I wonder if those are related in any way.
Well, Dean Crutchfield, I want to return to something that Aral Balkan made reference to earlier, that the protection of data is a core business issue for Apple, that it is something that it bases its selling strategies on, and it is something that the public have come to expect. Would them giving in to this judicial case actually impact on their public reputation?
Yes, it would. I mean, we have to understand that we've got a brand here that's worth about $170 billion. It's the major player in the world. People are looking to it as a voice. They're looking to it as the vehicle that gives them this debate. So once Apple has to buckle down and accept or acquiesce to government requests, it will have a negative impact. But I think the fact that they've taken this time to really pitch their case, to really, make a strong point of view that defends the rights of people and their privacy, which is a treasure, let's be honest. Privacy is a treasure, and we're seeing Apple protect that as best they can. So I think there will be a certain acceptance level once they actually get to that court case. But this whole preamble has been very good for Apple to show, the where it stands and why it's protecting the public.
Well, Gary Miliefsky, let's just get one thing out of the way. Some critics contend, and indeed the government lawyers contend, that Apple is making something of a PR exercise out of this, that it is exercising, in fact, by resisting this legal injunction, a very smart marketing strategy. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Actually, in this case, based on my knowledge of their operating system and the cryptography, this is a big deal. They put all these features in because they wanted to launch Apple Pay so that consumers around the globe who have bought their 400 million iPhones are going to be able to do safe, secure online transactions. And you do know that by the end of this year, there will be $600 billion in cybercrime. It will be the largest form of crime in the world. So Apple's move to secure the phone is also a move to make e-commerce or mobile commerce a safe experience.
Well, Aral Balkan, I just want to return to the words that Tim Cook wrote in his letter to Apple customers, where he said, "It is a chilling example of overreach by the government that would set a dangerous precedent that threatens everyone's civil liberties." Is that overstating it, or is that an accurate statement?
I think that's a very accurate statement. And I think that's maybe somewhat what we're losing if we just see this as a brand exercise or, as corporate marketing. What we're talking about here is civil liberties. The battle for our civil liberties in the digital era is being fought with everyday things. The nature of these everyday things, our phones, our smart televisions, the Barbie dolls, the smart Barbie dolls that our kids play with, the nature of these everyday things will determine whether or not, they spy on us and whether that information by proxy is then available to the government, so everything that we do, or whether or not we're in control, whether we as individuals have ownership and control of our own information, our data, will determine the character of the society that we live in. These privacy is a key civil liberty. And I think it's very superficial to say, oh, this is just Apple's brand exercise. No, this is key to determining the type of society we live in the future, whether that will be a democracy or whether that will be a corporatocracy.
Well, Gary Miliefsky, in recent years... yes, come in, David. Dean Crutchfield.
Would we be having such news right now if it was Apple, if it was, say, Samsung or another company? Would this have such a world stage right now if it wasn't Apple? It's something on my mind as I watch the news. If this was a company, a successful company that maybe not such a great brand, would it have this kind of stage?
Your view, Aral Balkan?
Samsung would not even take this sort of a stand. This is not something that is in their character. I mean, Samsung might start caring about privacy now that Apple has, stated something, but we wouldn't hear it because I think Apple is uniquely positioned in this. They are very different to the other technology companies in that, like I said earlier, they took a series of choices in the past that have led them to a point where they can be very successful selling products, very successful without eroding the civil liberties of people. And I think that's the kind of business model that we need to support because it is in our interests as individuals as well. Google's business model of eroding our civil liberties, Facebook's business model of spying on everything that we do and monetizing that is going to lead to a world, if unchecked, if unregulated, where we don't have basic civil liberties.
Well, Gary Miliefsky, the times have changed, particularly since you were part of setting up Homeland Security, for example. The debate about privacy versus security has intensified in recent years. This case that we are looking at now, in a way, could be regarded as a culmination of a series of events. It is not a specific case. It is part of a process in which government stands accused of overreaching itself, of interfering with the private lives of citizens. Do you think that would be a correct analysis of the situation?
I would, and I would add a couple things. One is you're going to see iPads managing nuclear reactors over secured Wi-Fi one day, and power grids and other infrastructure. You're going to see iPads being used at restaurants and iPhones being used to do transactions. And the minute we allow either, as one of the guests called, a front door or an open door, most call it the back door, but once you create one for the U.S. government, even though they may attempt to hide the keys, I guarantee you that the 6,000 members of the North Korean cyber army are going to celebrate and get access to those back doors and try to damage our own infrastructure, our commerce. It's not a good thing. And just remember, opm.gov was breached. Whitehouse.gov was breached. State Department was breached because they didn't use encryption and they allowed themselves to get a back door in their network by a user clicking on a piece of bad, bad file, a malicious remote access Trojan. More security, more encryption is a better thing. More privacy is a better thing.
Well, Dean Crutchfield, that's an important point, pointing out...
What about a case like this? Like, it's victims and justice. People died. I mean, people were murdered. And this phone has some information that could be really useful. So I think we're all going, if it's a particular case, can that just be managed much better than suddenly this back door wide open to everybody? Is that really the case, given the nature of technology and the smart brains that are out there, that really would be the case, that this big back door would be wide open?
Well, Aral Balkan, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, this could have been managed really well with traditional policing if, while the phone was in the FBI's possession, they hadn't messed up by changing the password so that it could have been backed up to iCloud. There's something to be said about the fact that they are looking for a precedent here, to set a legal precedent that would give them unrestricted access to any phone that they want to. They messed up on the policing. Traditional policing is effective when done right. So, if they're going to mess up traditional policing, what are they going to do if they have access to all of our data, all of our information? So, this isn't about victims or this one situation. This is about our civil liberties. If we want to live in a democracy, that brings with it a certain amount of risk. Bad people will do bad things. We have ways of reducing that. We have traditional policing, but we have to accept some level of risk if we're going to live in a democracy.
Well, Gary Miliefsky, the frontman for the FBI, the director, James Comey, has for a long period of time been arguing that there should be encryption legislation. He was trying to push it to be adopted in Congress. So clearly this particular case, once again, is not in isolation as far as the director of the FBI is concerned. He has long been worried about the issue of encryption and has long been seeking ways in which to combat it, has he not?
Yeah, and just to understand this whole concept, if we don't use more encryption, we use less, or we create backdoor master keys. Think about the airline that the hacker was on, who proved, because it wasn't an encrypted network, from the entertainment network in a passenger seat, he moved the ailerons on a plane and he was later arrested. Think about the hackers who were in Wired magazine, who actually caused a Jeep to go off the road because it didn't have encryption. Encryption is a good thing, Backdoors are bad things. Weaknesses in systems will be taken advantage of by cyber criminals whenever those doors are opened.
Dean Crutchfield, when we're hearing statements like that, it almost becomes a national security issue. And encryption itself is a vital matter for national security in addition to personal security.
Well, exactly. This is a battle between the world's leading brand and the world's leading country. Let's be honest. So, it has a lot of implications, but the beauty is that we do have something like Apple that a lot of people admire and we enjoy their product. And so I think it's very natural to one of the other panelists saying that this is, it's perfect for a company like Apple to be taking up this mantle on such an important subject that quite likely other corporations just wouldn't have the credibility or just wouldn't have the clout to even raise the flag for the debate.
Gary Miliefsky, what happens if the state wins this particular case? What happens if Apple is forced by the judge to provide this update? What is the consequences going to be? Are we going to see a kind of encryption arms race resulting?
Well, the Apple iPhone will become a Ford Pinto. It will go from being a Cadillac with 6 airbags, and it will turn into the Ford Pinto of 1976. You tap the bumper and it blows up. This is not the right approach. Better security, stronger products made in America with strong encryption is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And our government should go back to the old gumshoe traditional methods in investigations and be proud of strong made in America products that aren't breakable, that the North Korean cyber army can't get into. These are good things. And then we should do a root cause analysis on how bad things happen. The cyber criminals will move.
I'll come to you in a moment, Dean. Just complete your statement, Gary.
Look, it's very detailed and it needs detailed and thorough thinking. This needs a thorough investigation. It deserves a thorough investigation. Very good point about the FBI, making the wrong mistake with the phone in the first place. But it still demands that justice is given and it needs information. So, you still have that unique element that changes this debate in so many ways.
But surely, Gary Miliefsky, if I can just come back to you again, some contend this is a fishing expedition. We're getting back to the point that Aral Balkan made about poor policing here. The FBI appears to be seeking a shortcut, and there's absolutely no certainty that it will get anything on that telephone. It's saying it might, it could, perhaps. So it's very much a fishing expedition and does look like rank bad policing.
It's very bad that 14 people died and others are injured. It's really sad. And my thoughts and prayers go out to those families and the victims. But the bottom line is this. Good policing means you want strong security in our country. That means you want products that are stronger, not weaker. And if we do create a backdoor, a way for the FBI to get the shortcut, as you say, I guarantee you China's cyber army, North Korea's cyber army, others will take advantage of those back doors. And when it comes to cyber crime, no one's going to want to move to mobile commerce when the phones can't be used safely for e-commerce, as an example. And this powers our GDP. This powers our economy.
Well, Aral Balkan, I just want to make reference to one thing as well, is that even before the state went to the courts to try and force Apple to comply, they had assembled some of the victims, families of the victims of the San Bernardino attack, to press their case against Apple. Now, that is virtually unprecedented, is it not?
It's unbelievable. It really is. I mean, it's so short-sighted as well. There's so many things that we're not discussing here. One of the things is this isn't just about America. I mean, I might have an American accent, but I'm not American. I have French citizenship. I live in Sweden. Do we deserve privacy? Do we deserve civil liberties as well? I believe we do. I believe a lot of people who live in other countries do as well. So we're not just talking about making America less safe. We're talking about making people in other countries, other citizens, other human beings, because that's kind of what we are, even if we're not American, right? Less safe. So, I think we're being very myopic.
America has to be that example. I agree.
What were you saying, Dean Crutchfield, very quickly?
I said, America is the best country to do that, to look at that on the global stage. I think really here, let's be simple. This is all about if I give you an inch, you'll take a mile. I mean, that's simply what this whole principle is about, that if they give that access to the government, suddenly they're going to want more and more and more, and the next minute Apple's going to have thousands of phones that they want to have broken or unlocked.
Well, a complicated issue, a large amount of grays. At that point, I'm afraid my thanks to our guests, Dean Crutchfield, Gary Miliefsky, and Aral Balkan. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mike Hanna, and the whole team here, goodbye for now.